Okay. So, okay, well, I don't know. Shall we start? Where is Bushra? Bushra?
Yes. I want to give give a simple definition for contrastive analysis.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Bushra.
Contrastive analysis is a systematic study of comparison between two languages, the native language L1 and the target language L2. Researchers from the 1940s to the 1960s conducted contrastive analysis systematically comparing two languages. They were motivated by the prospect of being able to identify points of similarity and difference between L1 and L2. In accordance with their assumptions, the researchers came into a decision that the main difficulties in learning a new language or the target language are caused by the interference of the native language L1. And this is the strong version of contrastive analysis. In this version, they claim that all errors are caused by L1 interference. But I think this is a wrong assumption. Why? Because like I'm an Arabic native speaker and I'm studying English. So if I make a mistake in the structure of present perfect, then in this case, my L1 doesn't play any role in this error because like we don't have an equivalent for the present perfect in Arabic. We have also a weak version of contrastive analysis, and in this weak version, they claim that some errors are caused by L1 interference, not all errors. Yes, and that's it.
Very good. So we have to remember these terms, the term interference, strong version, weak version, assumptions. Okay. All right, because we will be using these terms later on. Thank you, Bushra. Anyone else? Shadin. Okay, yes, Shadin. Go ahead. Where is Shadin Ismail?
Hi, doctor.
Yes.
I'm here, doctor.
Yes, go ahead, Shadin.
I just wanted to ask you, since you mentioned Helen Keller at the end of the last lecture, I wanted to ask you, is that a language?
The one she spoke? You mean the one she...
She didn't speak, actually.
She didn't speak because she was mute, deaf, and blind.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she was able to learn languages through let's say, touching, through the sensory feelings in her hands, okay, and in the hands of others. And yes, we can call that a language, because she was expressive in many ways. She was able to comprehend and she was able to produce. Okay, yes, we will call that a language, yeah, Shada.
Okay, thank you.
And her movie is a very interesting movie, by the way.
Yes, I have seen this, actually, when you mentioned.
I advise you all to see Helen Keller's movie. It's a very interesting movie. Very fascinating.
When you mentioned that, doctor, you remind me to watch it again.
Yeah. Yes, thank you
it's very good.
For bringing that up. Thank you, Shadan. Okay.
Thank you.
I want to thank those who participated and hope this will motivate others to participate in the coming lectures as well. But let's start with what Dana brought up when talking about second language. Zaina, yes, you have something. Zaina Veeb. Where is Zaina?
Yes, doctor, I'm here.
Yeah. Well,
Doctor, I want to talk about second language.
Okay.
Second language is a language that is not the native speaker, not the native language or not native speaker learned, but is learned later, usually as a foreign language, but it can be another language used in speaker's home. And the person like to learn language to better him about a very important skill. Maybe to because he need it to marry in life in his lifestyle. Or in his job or in his meeting, but we know and that linguistic applied and applied linguistic in general, it's related to all language, not specific in any language. All language has linguistic and has system to apply it, but maybe this person face difficult because it's not the language that he learned in his environment or in his country, but he needed or he wanted or he wanted to learn it because because he love it, or it's need it in place like job, meeting, maybe like married another woman from this country. That's it. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Azina. Thank you. Thank you. Well, yeah. Okay. As I was saying, the notion of a second language was brought about, which means when we talk about a second language, we talk about first language. If there is second, by definition, there is first, right? So they always talk about first language acquisition, second language acquisition, second language learning, but we cannot talk about first language learning. Nobody learns his first language. Okay, so we have a distinction between the term of learning and acquisition. We have as well foreign language learning, okay, but never foreign language acquisition. And we talk about, since we talk about first language acquisition, we need to bring the age variable into discussion. So we talk about children, adolescents, and adults as well. Okay, now let's take it for granted, because when we start talking about language acquisition sometime later on, we will talk in details about the age variable, but let's say for now that first language acquisition is the acquisition of your mother tongue, is the acquisition of your mother tongue, your native language. And this is something that you pick up naturally from the environment around you. And by the time you're like 3 or 4 years old, you find yourself communicating well in your native language or in your mother tongue. That's first language acquisition. Now, second language can be also acquisition if a child is doing that. Suppose that your mother tongue is Arabic. By the time you're like 3 years old, you were like speaking Arabic well, communicating with your parents and your brothers and sisters, and no problem. And then once you're like 3 or 4 years old, your parents move to live in a European country, let's say Germany or Britain or the United States or wherever. Okay, there you move to an environment where a new language is spoken, and you discover in a short period of time, few months later, that you become also a native speaker of the language of the environment that you have moved to. And that doesn't have to be through schooling, okay? Can be also natural. You can pick it up naturally from communicating with people around you, by being exposed to the language in its natural environment. Okay, so that's also second language acquisition. Now, you could also go there when you're like 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and you can acquire the language natively, but it is through learning, through formal learning. Because once you're like 7 or 8 or 9, they have to send you to school. So learning is not natural. Learning is formal, is done formally in school settings. Acquisition is done naturally, but learning is done formally in a school setting. An acquisition takes place only in the environment where the target language, as some of you have called it, second language, is spoken. So you cannot, like if you are in Jordan, we cannot say that you can acquire English, because English is not an environment where, sorry, Jordan is not an environment where English is used for communication. So acquisition takes place in the environment where the language is spoken. And therefore, what we do in Jordan here is foreign language learning. It's not second language learning, and it's not second language acquisition. Now, why have we talked about age? Age is important because there is a time limit when a person can acquire or learn the language like native speakers, if that person happens to be in the environment where that language is spoken. But if you go to that environment when you're like in your 20s, you will never be able to acquire the language as a native speaker. Some may do exceptional cases, but generally speaking, we talk about the general norm, not the exceptional case. And women are better than men in achieving native-like, okay, accent in the target language after the age of puberty. Okay, so the decisive age in language acquisition is the age of puberty. Why? Because native-like accent is determined by the physical growth of the vocal tract, okay, which is responsible for sound production, اللي هو الجزء العلوي من الرأس، يعني اللي هو الفم والحنجرة والأوتار وما إلى ذلك واللهاء okay. It seems that these parts of the human body reach full growth by the age of puberty. وبتكيفوا مع اللغة اللي أنت بتحكيها. They adjust to the language that you are speaking, and becomes difficult for them to readjust to a new language. يعني it's not something that has to do with the mental capacity of the person. ما لها علاقة بالقدرة العقلية عند الشخص. Okay? يبدو إنه الإنسان لما بيوصل عمر مثلا أو سن البلوغ الحنجرة والأعضاء الصوتية هذه خلص يكتمل نموها وبتأخذ شكل اللغة اللي يتحدثها هذا الشخص، فبصير صعب إعادة تكييفها مع لغة جديدة. وبالتالي native-like accent in the new language becomes difficult. Some people are able to overcome this problem, but those are exceptional cases. And the problem is less with women than it is with men. Okay? يعني يبدو إنه شكل الحنجرة قابل للتكيف أكثر عند المرأة منه عند الرجل. Now, does this mean I will not be able to become a fluent speaker of English? Does this mean I will not have like a native-like fluency and a native-like accuracy in the language? And the answer is no. ما لها علاقة لا بالفلوency ولا بالaccuracy. هي فقط لها علاقة بالنطق، بنطق اللغة زي ما بنطقوها أهل اللغة. لكن you can go to a country now, in your age, you can go to Britain or America or Canada or Australia or wherever, and you may become a more fluent and a more accurate speaker of English than the native speakers. ما نربط هذا بالaccuracy والfluency. الطلاقة اللغوية وسلامة اللغة موضوع مختلف تماماً عن إنك تتحدث اللغة بالطريقة اللي يتحدثها. So these are two different stories. يعني some people always confuse things and they say, well, we cannot, it means that we're hopeless, we cannot achieve a native-like accuracy or a native-like fluency. No, and the answer is no. You can become better than native speakers, even when it comes to accuracy and fluency. سلامة اللغة والطلاقة اللغوية هذا موضوع مختلف عن becoming a native-like speaker of the language، لأنه هذا مرتبط فقط بالأكسنت. أوكي؟ هذا مرتبط فقط في الأكسنت، والأكسنت قلنا إنه اللي يتحكم فيه هو نضوج الجهاز الصوتي عند الإنسان. Okay, some people are able to overcome this problem. Many cannot overcome this problem, but this will not influence your native-like or better than even native speakers accuracy and fluency. والأمثلة على ذلك كثيرة. كثير في ناس بيحكوا اللغة بطلاقة و-eloquency و-accuracy و-style better than native speakers، والأكسنت تبعهم يعني شيء هيك أحيانا ثقيل جدا، يحكوا اللغة بجيرمان accent ولا Russian accent ولا whatever, but their accuracy and fluency is so beautiful, much better than native speakers of the language. لكن ومع ذلك يظل في مشكلة اللي هي native like accent. The minute you speak, they will say this person is not a native speaker of the language, but that doesn't mean that that person does not speak the language in an elegant, stylish, accurate, fluent way. No. Sometimes you surprise the native speakers by your accuracy, your fluency, your eloquency in the language. Okay, so we differentiate between second language learning and foreign language learning. And we said second language learning when you learn the language in the environment where the language is spoken. Foreign language learning when you learn the language in an environment where the language is not spoken. يعني بس تطلع من غرفة الصف اللغة اللي راح تسمعها هي اللغة العربية وليست الإنجليزية. تقرأ الجرايد بالعربي، بتسمع محطات تلفزة باللغة العربية، كل شيء باللغة العربية. It's not the environment where the language is spoken. This is a foreign language environment. It's not a second language environment. Okay. A second language environment is when English is like spoken 24/7. يعني 24 ساعة 7 أيام في الأسبوع، كل اللي بتسمعه في داخل الصف وخارج الصف wherever you go, in supermarkets, in taxis, in at home, everywhere is English. That's a second language environment. If you do not live in an environment like that, then you are a foreign language learner. You are a foreign language learner. Now, let's talk about somebody else. Okay, let's talk about contrastive linguistics, which some of you have talked about, starting with Hussam and Dana and Bushra. And okay, yes, Bara, you have a question?
No, doctor, I want to say me.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
said Bara Aman. Yeah. Don't worry. If I miss a name, يعني it's not intentional, يا Bara. Okay. It's not with intention.
Okay, doctor.
Okay. All right. Contrastive analysis, contrastive linguistics, or comparative linguistics. 3 terms for the same approach, if we can call it an approach to language learning. And it's an important approach in language translation as well. Contrastive analysis as an approach began in 1945, and the founder of this approach is Charles Fries. And again, it's at the time when applied linguistics was born. Okay, because we said it was the first time that we heard the term 1948. It was in the same school, the same institute that introduced the term applied linguistics, introduced the approach called contrastive analysis. Why contrastive analysis? Well, it was again the story of Second World War, and they were looking for a better way, a faster way to teach languages in a very short period of time. Okay, because of the war at that time. They were interested in finding a better approach to teaching languages. All right, let's admit moment. Okay. And as a result of working on developing an approach, contrastive analysis was born. At that time, if you remember, the structuralist school in linguistics was dominant, and the behaviorist school as well was dominant. And they worked on comparing 2 languages. They worked on comparing 2 languages at all levels, at all linguistic levels, at the phonetics level, at the phonology level, at the syntax level, at the morphology level, at the semantic level. So they were comparing languages. And as Hussam said, they were like interested in the sentence as the largest unit of analysis when it comes to talking about structure. All right. The assumption was that why do we need to compare languages? We would like to find out similarities and differences between languages. What good does that do? When we know the similarities, we can forget about focusing on similarities in language teaching, so we can save time. يعني العناصر المتشابهة بين اللغتين هذه ما راح نركز عليها في التدريس، لأنه النقل من أو الترجمة من اللغة 1 إلى اللغة 2 أو العكس ما راح ينتج عنها أخطاء. ليش؟ بسبب التشابه equivalent structures between languages. And I think Hussam introduced the notion of equivalence. Yeah. So similarities, we would like to find out similarities, so we will not focus on them. Rather, we will focus on differences, because differences are equivalent to difficulties. That was their understanding. What's different is difficult, okay? And therefore, we should teach differences between languages. And this approach was based on the assumption that all errors that you make in L2 are the result of L1 interference. All errors, remember? All errors. So put 2 lines under the word all. Why? Because the first language interferes in the second language as a result of being bad habits. اللغة الأم بتصير تمثل bad habits بالنسبة للغة الثانية. Okay? And therefore, the errors you make in L2 are the bad habits. And we need to get rid of bad habits. Okay? So every error you make in L2 is the result of L1 interference. Not only that, but because we know the similarities and differences, we can say all errors are predictable. Okay? All errors are predictable. يعني مجرد ما عرفت شو الفروق بين اللغات، okay? معناته بتقدر تتنبأ بكل الأخطاء اللي ممكن يقعوا فيها الطلاب. Okay? Because they are different in the 2 languages. So the first one, all errors are the result of L1 interference. All errors are predictable. All errors are explainable in terms of L1 interference. These are the 3 basic assumptions. Okay, these are the 3 basic assumptions. All errors are the result of L1 interference. All errors are predictable. All errors can be explained in terms of L1. Okay, in terms of L1. يعني أي خطأ يرتكبه المتعلم في اللغة الثانية ممكن نشرحه لأنه هذا تركيب موجود في اللغة الأم. These 3 assumptions are the premises, if you like, or the hypotheses of the first version of contrastive analysis, which was called the strong version. سموه السترونج version لأنه ما ترك الباب مفتوح شوي بحيث أنه نسمح بهوامش أخرى. حكى all errors are the result of L1 interference. All errors are predictable. All errors can be explained in terms of L1 structure. Okay. All right. Now, when the generative transformational school started by Chomsky, okay, or Hussam referred to it by the generative what did you call it, Hussam? I cannot remember. Generative something. Okay. Generative transformational school. That's how we know it. By Chomsky. Okay. Things have changed. Because under the new school, this contrastive analysis theory was destined to die the way everything related to structuralism and behaviorism died. But people were like fascinated by contrastive analysis, and they don't want to stop doing contrastive analysis between languages. So they decided to modify the assumptions of the strong version. And this modification was based on actual data. It's not like just I decide to keep contrastive analysis, I'm going to modify it the way I like. No, it was based on actual data. They have collected errors made by language learners, and they realized that some of the errors have nothing to do with L1 interference. كثير من الأخطاء ما لها علاقة بتدخل اللغة الأم، مش بس هيك. What they thought is going to be a problem for the language learner because it's different from the mother tongue turned out not to be a problem. يعني نعطيكم مثال مثلا على مستوى الفونetics. ال B وال P sounds in English are equivalent to one sound in Arabic, and that's the B sound, right? هم عندهم ال P, which is a voiceless bilabial stop, وال B, which is a voiced bilabial stop. Okay? بالعربي احنا عندنا فقط as a phoneme اللي هي الباء اللي هي voiced bilabial stop. لأنه ما عندنا voiceless bilabial، فبناء على ال contrastive analysis بشكلها القديم نتنبأ إنه أي كلمة فيها حرف الباء راح تكون تخلق مشكلة للعربي لما بيتعلم إنجليزي. and turns out to be true. كثير من الناس بلفظ paper as paper و park as bark و pretend as pretend و appropriate as appropriate وما إلى ذلك. أوكي؟ هذا التنبؤ يعني ضبط، وبالتالي إنه لأنه مختلف عن اللغة الإنجليزية ظهر مشاكل عند بعض العرب وليس كل العرب. مع إنه as an allophone the P, which is a voiceless sound, does exist in Arabic. Take the example, the word sept. Sept. The P in sept is a voiceless allophone. It's not a voiced allophone. لأنه إجا قبليها voiceless وإجا بعديها voiceless، فهي اكتسبت صفة الدي-voicing من الصوت اللي قبلها والصوت اللي بعدها. وبالتالي as an allophone هي موجودة، بس as a phoneme it does not exist. لذلك بعض العرب هذا ما ظهر عندهم مشكلة، مثل اللبنانيين مثلا وبعض سكان المغرب العربي، وهذا ما كان عندهم مشكلة أبدا في التمييز بين الباء والبا in English. لكن ناخذ مثلا الفريكاتيفز الF والV. اوكي؟ ما عندنا V sound in Arabic. alright؟ وبالتالي مفروض بناء على contrastive analysis strong version انه يكون عندنا مشاكل في نطق الفا sound. اوكي؟ لكن اتضح انه هذا الحكي مش صحيح. ما عندنا مشكلة نقول very و verify و verification و alive وما إلى ذلك. So this prediction proved out to be wrong. So not everything different in L1 is going to be a difficulty in L2 or the other way around. Okay? لذلك يعني based on data, not every error in L2 is predictable based on differences between L1 and L2. وزي ما حكت زميلتكم the present perfect ما عندنا structure مطابق له في اللغة العربية، بس وبالتالي لما احنا بنقع بأخطاء اللغة العربية ما لها علاقة. We don't have the auxiliary have or has or had plus the past participle. ما عندنا التصريف الثالث للفعل باللغة العربية. So what does Arabic have to do with this? Okay, this cannot be explained in terms of Arabic. It has to do with English itself. Okay, لذلك فرضيتهم بأنه all errors are predictable هي فرضية خاطئة، وأنه كل الأخطاء ممكن شرحها بالرجوع إلى اللغة الأم هي كمان فرضية خاطئة. Okay، وبالتالي وكمان أنه مش كل شيء مختلف يقابله شيء صعب. أحيانا الأشياء المتشابهة تخلق مشاكل بين اللغتين، وهذا بين من خلال الأخطاء اللي بيرتكبها الطلاب. يعني في لغات مثل الفرنسية فيها verb to be I am a student، والفرنسي لما بدأ يتعلم اللغة الإنجليزية أول شيء بيسويه بيسقط فعل verb to be وبصير يقول I student، مع إنه بالفرنسي في عندهم verb to be. أوكي، معناته مش اللغة الأم، رغم إنه هذول أشياء متشابهين بين اللغتين، ومع ذلك بيعمل مشاكل. Okay, so contrastive analysis in its strong version is rejected and had to be modified to the weak version of contrastive analysis. We will talk about the weak version of contrastive analysis tomorrow, but before talking about contrastive analysis in its weak version, we will be talking about error analysis. Okay? So if you like to prepare something again, those who have not, on error analysis, the weak version of contrastive analysis, and something called interlanguage, you're welcome to participate. We will continue this tomorrow, and until we meet, يعطيكم العافية جميعا وإلى اللقاء. Okay? سلام.
مع السلامة دكتور.
اوكي، مع السلامة. نلتقي غدا إن شاء الله بنفس الموعد 12:30. اوكي.